Okay, seems like we're live now. It is 12 p.m. This is the Draw the Line Athletics Forum with athlete, coach, speaker, activist, Chuck Winters.
Yes.
Chuck, thanks a lot for coming.
No problem.
It's an honor to have you here.
Yes.
My name is David Garzon. I am the Community Engagement Manager at White Ribbon. And we're currently doing a Facebook Live event in the city of Toronto. We're in the White Ribbon's office in Eglinton and Yonge. And I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking the First Peoples of this territory and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land in order for us to have this meeting. Draw the Line campaign is funded by the Government of Ontario, and it aims to engage Ontarians in discussions and conversations about sexual violence and abuse. This campaign challenges common myths about sexual violence and equips bystanders with information on how to intervene safely and effectively in situations of violence and abuse. So, before we start with our conversation, for the folks who are joining us and who will be watching this video, I'd like to introduce our guest with a short bio that I have prepared for today. So, Chuck is not Canadian.
No.
He's Canadian by choice, like myself.
Yes.
He was born in the States. He grew up in Detroit,
Yes.
attended the University of Michigan, where he played both baseball and football, and received a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. Then after graduating, he played in the Arena Football League as part of the Detroit Fury. After 3 seasons with this league, he was honored with the 2002 Hero Award, where his strong commitment to community and philanthropic activities. In 2003, Chuck comes to Canada, comes to Toronto. He plays for the Toronto Argonauts, with whom he wins the Grey Cup in 2004.
Yes.
In 2009, Chuck retires from football and becomes a motivational speaker and youth mentor who speaks up against violence, sexism, and bullying.
Yes.
Right? And right now, he's the owner and founder of Last Play Training, a company that is designed to inspire youth to excel both in life and athletics. Did I get everything right?
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yes, thanks a lot. And we only have 1 hour.
I
For
mean,
this
that's not enough time. We're gonna
Not
need more
enough
than
time.
that.
We
Yeah.
might have you folks here for a couple more hours,
Yeah.
2 or 3. So I wanted to start this conversation just by asking you what draws you to these kind of topics. Like, I mean, we always think of sports culture, and we never relate that area
Yeah.
with gender equity, gender-based violence prevention, and so on. So
Yeah.
what led you to start talking about this?
Well, initially it was me just speaking in general, right? Just kind of having a platform, understanding how serious that platform was. And then from there, it's my own personal life. Like my mom, I watched and experienced her go through her ordeals of domestic violence. And, when you're going through it, it's very stressful. But now I see it as a tool that I use as a reference base for me to be able to speak on it, to be able to understand how you can go from one extreme of seeing those domestic violence to be able to speak on it and say, okay, this is I'm speaking from, personal experience to be able to tell you this is how I made it through. Because ultimately that's what the whole reference is, to be able to say, okay, I've done something, now this is how I made it to the other side. We do it in everything in life, from sports, you get taught by a coach, and business, you get a mentor that helps you, with that, So now I want to be that mentor, that coach, to be able to help individuals say, okay, this is how I made it through the ordeals that I had, my experiences that I've seen, and now I made the change, come down the path that I did in order to make the same changes that I did.
So would you say that motivation comes from an early age and with direct experiences with violence?
For me, I don't think early age, because at the early age you're dealing with the pain, right? You don't really not dealing with the changing part of it. You're just dealing with like, oh, why is this happening to me? I mean, when you're introduced into society, it's just taken from me being a baby. You're a kid, right? You just know love, and then when you experience these, human atrocities, you're thinking, man, what is this? Like, I don't want that. That doesn't feel good. I don't want to be in my own household and still have to have my coat on, literally. You know, I can't take my shoes off and relax. Your home is supposed to be where you're relaxing, comfortable, and can let your hair down. No, I'm always on edge. I'm always sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm always got a coat on. I always got my socks. I'm always prepared to flee. And now so when you finally get to the other side and I could stand on my own 2 feet and understand that had nothing to do with me. You know, it had nothing to do with my mother. It was the experience from the man that he had his own personal experiences. As I started to kind of divulge more into his story, his dad used to abuse his mom. So now he never broke the cycle. So now when I get older, I'm like, oh, it's about breaking the cycle. I'm going to break the cycle. I do not want somebody to experience the same pain that I experienced. I do not want somebody to see the same pain in my mom's eyes or their mother's eyes that I saw in mine. You know, the wounds, the healing, all that stuff. You know, I don't want them to experience that. So if you can listen to me, if you give me this platform, and you know, sports gave me that platform, and if I can change your life by telling you, look, I did it. I changed. I'm a different person than I was when I was a kid. You can do it too. If that can change a life and change multiple lives, sign me up a million times over, because that's what I really want to do, is change someone's life.
Okay. Chuck and I were discussing earlier on how my motivation also came from seeing women affected in my family by violence, right?
Yeah.
I saw it face to face, and that's when I said, as you did, like, I cannot be like that. I cannot see women around me being affected in that way, right?
Yeah.
And one of the questions we had discussed a little bit earlier on was, do you think that men have to see it like face to face and experience violence like in their own household in order to change their attitudes towards violence and become better?
And I, you know what, when you asked the question initially, and I still stand by the first thoughts that I stated, that I don't think you have to see it, because that's something that's been taught to us, right? That's one of those, you know, behaviors that, because when you're a kid, you know, we always teach our, you know, 5, 6-year-old kids, if they hit, no, do not hit. So they understand growing up not hitting. It's not until you're taught that that's acceptable when you see, oh, he did that. Oh, daddy did this, or, you know, my uncle did this, and that's acceptable. He didn't get punished. No one said, don't do that. So that's the one element of it, right? So I look at it and say, okay, we never initially have the tools that's been taught to us. It's something that somebody you saw and it became acceptable to behave in that fashion, because we were taught something totally different. Now, when a kid goes and experiences it on their own, it does have an impact, a greater impact, and has an opportunity because of the pain that they see. Because that emotional pain that you deal with, regardless of that, like I said, I think we all get up in the morning wanting to be happy. We don't want stress. Stress is probably our number one killer in life. You know, that takes away from everything that we have. So, yeah, it will accelerate it, but you don't necessarily have to experience it in order to stand up for it or actually have to not do it, right? Because you don't, it's not in your realm, right? If you never see it, how can you ever have that, you know, be introduced to that element? If it's just like, you know, if you've never seen dog violence, how could you know how it impacts you? Because you never experienced it. Yeah, if you experience it, it can change your life, and it will. But if you don't never see that, it's never been introduced to you, you really don't have an alternative to choose whether not to or to do it. It's because there's tons of people who never experience it, who never see it, you know, who grow up in a great family, you know, who, you know, secluded enough where life doesn't impact them. Some people don't watch the news. Some people don't, you know, keep up with modern day, you know, the society, current events and all those things. So they will never even encounter that, you know. But then on the flip side, when it does, it will change you. It will change you. It will impact you. It will be a scar that you will always have. We'll always be healing. We'll always never get rid of that pain. That scar will be eternally in my soul for the rest of my life. Yes, it will accelerate that change, right? But not necessarily do you have to experience it in order not to stand up, or and be a supporter.
So would you say it's more of a matter of creating awareness? Do you think that a lot of people just don't experience it and therefore they're not aware of what's going on and just ignore what's happening out there in regards to violence?
Well, you know, it's just like anything in day-to-day experiences, right? Until something is on your doorstep, you really don't deal with it, right? You only deal with the circle of things that you have in your life. Like if you never, you know, I had a gentleman at my flag football league that he was complaining. He was older gentleman, and he was complaining to my DJ about the music Yeah, it was rap music. So, but it's funny because he was like, gotta be in his almost 80, and he goes, "Why do you gotta play this music so loud?" And I already knew it in his head, man. Why you gotta play this rap music so loud? And it's been, But for him, when I walked over and I said, "Well, sir, this is a part of the atmosphere. All right, this is what we created." So you ever been to a sporting event? No. You ever play sports? No. I'm trying to get something to relate to him. So, well, look, I live off by the escarpment. I have, peacocks in my backyard. I'm peaceful. This is where I grew up. I never played sports. I mean, he cut out anything involved with music.
Yeah.
And so for him, and I go, and I'm trying to put it related to the sense, like, for him, his walk of life, he would never experience that element of music. So how can I tell you, that, oh, no, you got it. This is how it works, right? So for some kids and for people, some people never experience it. So it's not on your doorstep. So why would I entertain that thought, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because if that's the case, we were just saying, okay, so we know that there's sex trades outside in this society. We know there's homelessness. We know that there's drug addicts. We know that there's, all types of things that goes on. There's burglars. There's all types of things, in society. If it's not on your doorstep, do you deal with it? Or you just say, okay, it's not in my realm, so no, I won't deal with that. And that's a lot of people in society that, one, especially here, and I look and I say Canada, just because I know when I've grown in the U.S., I saw firsthand, outside of my own household, issues of gender-based violence, domestic violence, walking down the street. I saw men talk, derogatory to women. It was nothing that you hid. That was something you saw on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I was like, whoa, this, you can talk to her like that? And you have to be able to, somebody has to tell you, no, man, that's not acceptable, right? I see it on a day-to-day basis. I'm in Milton. I don't see it on a day-to-day basis. I don't see any type of homelessness. I don't hear any gunshots. I don't hear any sirens. I don't hear those things. So I'm not waking up thinking, oh, what's the worst case scenario in life? Let me go deal with it. You walk down the least stressful path of life. So when I look at people and say, okay, well, they're not dealing with the issue, not because of the fact that they don't want to deal with it, because now it's not in my normal walk of path. I don't want to go have to encounter that because I don't want to walk down and live with stress. I want to walk away from stress. But if you're experiencing it, you have no choice but to stand up for it.
So it's more like creating a bridge between us, our message, and the folks who are not touched on daily basis by that message, right?
Yes, exactly.
We'll go back to that point when we talk about talking to athletes and coaches, but I want to talk a little bit about sports culture, right? Mm-hmm. There is this stereotype about how sport teams behave and so on that I want to discuss a little bit. So I was doing some research because I've never played sports like soccer, but not professionally, right? And I found some descriptions that try to put that stereotype together, right? Mm-hmm. So these are considered always to be male dominated, but there is a lot of emphasis on violence, right? Mm-hmm. There is the use of language is very important in sports culture, which is a language of shaming in a sexist and sometimes homophobic way to create motivation. So that is, for example, somebody is not running fast enough, so you're running like a girl, or you're hitting like a girl, or And there is an aspect of bro culture, what we call here bro culture, of you cover my back, I cover yours, and that is not only seen between players, but also between the management of teams and universities who just try to protect certain players. Even if they're accused of sexual misconduct and so on, because they want to protect the reputation and so on. It's a good kid, boys will be boys and so on, right?
Yeah.
So, did you experience is the stereotype true? In your experience, did you see it when you were growing up and becoming an athlete, and do you see it now in the sports?
Well, and those comments are commonplace. That was something that you were taught in sports, right? I mean, you hit like a girl. You're soft. Don't do this. You're weak. All those conversations, and I think those are normal behaviors or normal conversations in that sporting realm. Mm-hmm. To no fault of no one, because we all learned it from somewhere else, right? It's even when you're addressing, I coach a girls basketball team, and I use the word guys. Now, I learned it from my daughter. So my son, when they were younger, he would always address his sisters as the guys. Hey, where are the guys at? Right? And so I never really thought about it in that sense. But when I said it and I was talking to my girls, and I was like, okay, well, hey, you guys come on, bring it in. Right? Just a generic word, not really putting too much emphasis on the element, but how loosely, like it just came out, right? Because I'm like, oh, my son addresses girls is that way. Instead of saying, hey, girls, bring it all in here. Then we go to do a breakdown. And I go, hey, what's the breakdown? And I go, oh, is it Lady Huskies? And one of the girls said, no, well, why does it have to be Lady Huskies? The boys don't say, hey, it's boys Huskies when we break it down. And I go, you're right. So it's just Huskies. We represent the same team that these boys are representing. So why do we have to add this extra word in the front of it to signify who we are dealing with?
It's like male is default, and then we have to add like girls.
And that's just in normal practice of sports, right? And your normal dialogue. Once again, what's been taught to us in society. Like I didn't go and say, oh, let me look up in the book dictionary. How do you address girls? It just became normal conversation, right? So when you do look at it, I don't think that anyone addresses your normal behaviors or normal patterns or habits that you do have. When you decide to do that and reflect on it, it can definitely change your whole perspective of how you think, of how you coach, and how you present. For myself, because I am a person who reflects on what I do on a day-to-day basis, this just happened to me last Friday. I had totally addressed it. Totally changed my perspective because I thought about it after I said it. When I left to reflect, like, wow, I wonder if I offended anyone, not choosing to. I mean, just selectively with my words, because I'm coming from a place of sincerity. Or did I have a negative impact with my girls by me making those comments, right? Like I said, and I'm generically coming from, my son would address my daughters by saying guys. Hey, where are the guys at? Not thinking it was a negative thing, and it could be taken either way, right? Because I don't think it could be a negative, but it ultimately gets you to think of like, wow, where did this train of thinking come from? And that's the same thing. How many coaches are willing to sit back and look at themselves and say, all right, I was taught this when I was growing up. If you run out of here and you're not physical, you're not strong, you don't display this, you're acting like a girl. You were taught that. That was something you were said. And you never thought, you blinked the eye about it, it rolled off your tongue. That was normal conversation, you know. And then when you start reflecting on it, you go, wow, that's not it. How many coaches are willing to step up and make that adjustment to change their behaviors? That's the hard question in itself, because not a lot of people will be willing to make that adjustment. A lot of people we're habits, we're beings of habit. We get up, we do the same thing. We brush our teeth with the same hand. You go out the same way, you eat the same meal every morning. You do the same things by habit. And until you sit back and try to change those habits and say, wow, I need to really be conscious of what I'm doing, how I'm saying this, how I'm presenting, it'll automatically continue to go down that default. But that's something that needs to be addressed in the sense, if we're talking about changing our culture so that it can be beneficial and we can minimize gender-based violence and the essence of how we see our kids, how we teach our kids, especially our boys, and then uplift our girls.
So would you say that you have seen some changes between what you saw when you were in university, between what you see now in regards to sports culture?
I can say I can see change in my environment.
Yeah. The one you have created.
The one I've created, as an individual, because I want to be the example that I want to see in society. I can't say that I've seen a change in the whole sporting realm, because it's a daunting task. It can be accomplished, but you got to go to each individual, right, to say, okay, you need to take this on and think about how you're presenting yourself and what you've been taught. Now, let's go back into sports. A lot of people, stereotypically, dumb jocks. That's a typical conversation in the sporting realm, right? If you're taking that and you believe in the dumb jock concept, How many guys, if you're the considered ignorant jock, gonna really look at, oh man, let me check myself out and really look at that? No, they're not looking at that. They're looking at how much money they got in their pocket, how many change they can put on, how many cars they can get, how many women they can go out with. That's a part of that realm too. So now you're asking them to challenge the ideologies that's been given to you and taught to you, to challenge how do you present yourself. This is way more important. The dollar amount, how I'm living, is way more important than me communicating and I'm being able to articulate myself in a different fashion. That's low on the totem pole. So yeah, I don't think there should be immediate change, but if we continue to speak about it and challenge people, I definitely will see some changes, because there are very intelligent men that play sports. They become businessmen, they become fathers, they become husbands. Now it becomes a different dialogue when you have that, when you have your own daughters you're dealing with now, or your wife you're dealing with. Now you're like, oh wow, yeah, I need to really adjust this, because this person is the individual that's looking up to me. This daughter of mine is going to look for, I'm going to be the example of the man that she's going to look for. So if these words come out of my mouth and it happens to her, I got to know I taught her how to be that way. I taught her to accept those words, because that's how I was presenting myself.
And I think one of the reasons why we appreciate you being here is because we recognize that the area of sports and the sports culture really need this conversation to happen. I was at a school the other day, and they were telling me how educators in the schools, like the teachers, do a really good job in addressing homophobia, sexism, and all those things, right? But then they were telling me how the kids would go to their hockey teams, their football teams, and then they would learn all this language and bring it back to the schools and just create chaos, right? So that's why we wanted to speak about how we incorporate this conversation into the realm of athletics, right?
Yeah.
So based on your practice, based on your experience as a coach, how do you tackle all these elements of a sports culture? Like, what language do you use? How do you encourage folks into becoming better without necessarily comparing them to the opposite sex or diminishing them in a way like that?
I mean, it's something it's gotta be a part of your lesson, right? It has to be something you have to believe in and stand for. It's a part of my lesson on how to treat people. I gave you one of the cards, right? That became a part of my lesson, to say, okay, this is how you treat people. Give this card out. You know, it takes no actions from no one else, but to be able to bring, like I said, this act of kindness to somebody.
So Chuck was just sharing with us this card. If maybe you can please read it.
So, act of kindness. An attempt has been made to put a smile on your face or simply make a part of your day life better. When an opportunity presents itself, consider choosing an act of kindness and passing it along. Have a great day. And it's just a simple card that I provide to people if I'm at Tim Hortons, if I'm walking on the street, because you never know what someone else is going through. It's impossible, right? So if I can take this and give this to you, and that can put a smile on your face, I've changed your perspective on life. You never know what you would do to someone else. You never know what somebody was in walking, what path they were walking down, what they were going ahead to do. They could be going ahead to go do something negative, and you gave them this, and it changed their whole perspective, right? So I do that in the sense of being able to just like, look, all right, I don't know what you're dealing with, but I put that in my lesson to be able to teach with my players, because I know that having a coach can ultimately change your life. I look at the coaches that impact me and made me into the man that I am, to Mr. Crosby, Mr. Moore, Mr. Brown, Mr. Mitchell. All these men still to this day, Mr. Atkinson, Teron Thompson. I can go on the list of men that ultimately changed my life. And I still remember these guys. These guys were when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And I can still remember names. There's some stuff I can't remember just yesterday. And I still remember these guys and these men's lives and what they did for me. So when I look at the impact that a coach can have, if I can go change these kids' lives by just entering a lesson, I have a platform. I got, 75 kids that I practice with. They listen to every word that I say. If I say, go jump over the fence, they're going to go jump over the fence. So why not use that platform to say, okay, guys, this is how you treat people. This is how you interact with people. This is not acceptable conversation. This is not, and also be that example, one, for myself and also for the others around me, right? Give those words to them. All right, I'm going to give you the words to say. I hope and pray that in Milton and where I'm at in my walk of my path that no one is dealing with domestic violence, but I don't know. But I always come from the perspective of I need to teach because I don't know what you're doing with. Teach you, talk to you as if you don't know. So when I talk to you as if you don't know, I can't walk around and walk away from there and say, okay, I assume that you knew that you shouldn't be doing that. Come from no assumption. I don't assume you know, I assume you know nothing. So I'm gonna teach you everything.
Okay. And I feel one of the reasons why coaches stay away from these conversations is because they think that it might ruin a performance or it might bring it down. Traditionally, folks use those shaming mechanisms to create that motivation, right? Do you think that that's a myth? Do you think that you can just create motivation while having a healthy relationship with the folks you're coaching and without having to go to the use of diminishing language?
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. Motivation comes from motivation. It don't come from negativity, right? I mean, those are negative factors, I think, that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that it motivates some others and then it destroys others. Like some people get yelled at and called out their name and it destroys them. I had experience with one of the coaches in my school where it was, and not providing names, but when I'm walking and instead of him coming to me regardless of regardless of what happened, play good, bad, good or bad, he would come, it would be a negative comment in order to motivate me. Now, I am fueled by you're not going to tell me that I can't do something. If you say I can't, or if you give me a negative, I'm going to flip that because you're not going to talk negative to me. That's how I'm fueled. Some people, you say something negative, they crash. They go more, it's more submissive and go get more over, covert and get into their shell. And so I don't believe in that. Like that's a 50-50 chance, maybe even an 80-20 chance that you may get that 20% of people that say, oh man, I'm not that. Great example, we're playing a game, big time game, and we win the game. I had 17, 18 tackles. So you think everybody would be excited. Coach come in, oh, great job. He walked over to me, I thought I'd never see you win a big game, and walked away. How is that motivation?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, instead of like, hey man, pat you on the back. No. He used the opposite. That still sticks with me. Okay, cool, I'm gonna show you. Now the next game, I'm gonna have 20 tackles, which I did. Because now the motivation was like, you're gonna go tell me what I'm, or you don't, give me a pat on the back, you don't motivate me. So I take my personal experience and say, no man, I'm not gonna motivate. You don't have to motivate me because I lose a percentage of you by coming from that path. But I step back. Old school coaching was taught that way. Exactly. Cuss you out, call you out your name, tell you you're soft, you act like a girl. All that was old school coaching. That was old way that we were taught in society. And then I said, okay, well, I know how I felt. I know how I'm built internally and what makes me want to change. Every kid is not that. So how is it that I can capture more kids? And it's from motivation, being encouraging. Hey buddy, good job. Hey man, that was a great job you did there. Hey, I need this from you. Hey, this is what can get you to this path. If you go this route, this is how you can be great. Everybody wants to be great. Nobody walks around wanting to be average. You get into something trying to be the best that you can be at. If I can assist you by using my words and also finding the tools and the drill to get you there, it's all through the right positive reinforcement, not through negative reinforcement, right? Same thing with a dog. I mean, you training a dog, you give him more pat on the back, he's gonna continue to do the same thing, right? Not if you give him something and then punch him in the side, he will never do that again, right? So you lose a majority. Some dogs will respond to that. But that scar will always be there. That dog will never forget the fact that you hit him in the side and told him, that won't, he'll never get there. It'll be prolong that motivation or his time or for him getting to change whatever that behavior. So I always take the positive side. Look, you can do it by always being positive and always encouraging and uplifting kids.
Great. Thanks a lot for sharing that because I feel like a lot of coaches are going to find that message refreshing.
Yeah.
And they're going to profit from it, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason why we're here is to discuss how we can incorporate this conversation into athletics, and how we can maybe suggest steps for athletes and coaches to talk about these issues. So maybe going from the lowest, like let's say there is a not the lowest, like at an individual level, there is an athlete that is part of this culture. It's knows there is some toxicity in his environment, his or her environment. What steps would you recommend for this athlete to come forward and start talking about violence? Start talking about these issues that we're talking about.
Well, the first one is to look at your own behaviors, right? That's the first thing. So once you look at your own behaviors, you can see the impact that it has on you and also others, right? So that's the first initial thing. Once you can do that, and then you can come from a positive position, the next step is to be able to speak about it, right? To go out and stand up and say, okay, look, this is how we have to treat individuals, especially women, in our environment. So you have to be the example in order for you to make the change. You can't make the change and not be the example, right? That's kind of hypocritical. So that's the second step. The third step is to find your support, right? It's to go and look, okay, who is going to be my ally as I go down this path to be able to make a change in my environment? Because you're not going to change it as a mass. It has to start from the smaller elements, and then it's harder to change. It's like the phrase, it's easier to teach a young dog new tricks than an old dog old new tricks or whatever it is. That one. It's hard to change, when we get to becoming an adult, but we can change the mindset of how we treat our kids. Those guys have a chance to be able to change. Not saying that when you get older you don't have a chance, but it's going to take something dramatic in order for it to change you how you want to be changed. Because now you already got to a point where my behaviors, my actions have gotten me to this point. All right, let's go look at a society pimp. You get an old pimp, he's not going to change his behaviors. He's been doing what his practices since for whatever. That's his lifestyle. So now I'm asking you to change, but you get a new guy who just came. No, man, you don't have to go down this path. You can go take those same, manipulation, communication, all those type of skills, and go get into business work. That it's the same type of thing, same element, charisma, communication, articulate, all those things that you use to manipulate somebody to change and do something. You can do the same thing in the business world. Now that's more appealing to somebody who's just starting getting into that, because now we change. That's the same thing with our kids. It's more appealing to you when you start walking down the path to input this information into your computer to say, oh, let this program run. Use these words, use this dialogue, use this. These are the elements you need to do. You need to first address yourself, address your knowledge, and then go get you some support. Once you speak out on it, now I'm putting myself out there, and no one walks around wanting to be called a liar. That's a label nobody wants to have. I don't want to be called a liar. So now, especially a kid. So now, all right, you don't want to be called this is what you need to stand up for. Those three things. You start with those three paths. Now we can go, and now it's a part of our dialogue on a day-to-day basis. And now that you can change who you are as a person if you have been introduced to it. If you haven't been introduced to it, this is the stance. This is what you're going to stand for, regardless, right? And then so the one I feel is daunting is the one who has experienced it, who's seen their mom being, abused in the household, who's seen their, alcoholic dad come in, abusive verbally. Those are the ones that's hard to change, because especially if they have a good relationship with their father, that is the one that's just going to be difficult to change. Because out of love and respect for my dad, I don't want to follow in his path, but it may not be something if I do lash out, my dad did it. Not knowing if that dialogue is not there, my dad did it, it's not that bad. I can remember having that same dialogue with myself. If my stepdad was abusing my mom, if I yelled, I'm not as bad as he is. Right? He used to hit my mom, I'm yelling, so it's not as bad. Once you start looking at that, now I'm really, all right, cool. Now it's in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, but that ain't it either. Yelling is not it. That ain't how you convey yourself. That's not, does all leaders yell? No. A true leader don't have to yell. I can sit here and talk to you very calmly. Having the control of your emotions, that's real power. That's self-control. That's self-discipline. Once I learned that and understood, because it's not yelling and screaming, oh, you got to listen to me. I lose you once the minute I raise my voice. But when I can sit there and understand, like, oh, let me calmly come to you and say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want you to do. You're more receptive to say, oh, okay, I'll listen to you, because he came real calm. But the minute I raise my voice, I lose. Those are the ones I feel have a hard time. It's the kid who's seen it. How did he change? How do we get that kid to say, look, no, it's not acceptable. Your behaviors are not acceptable. But these conversations is something that we continue to have that will help those kids change.
And this is great advice on leadership. And I was going to ask you next, what would be an advice for coaches? And I think that you covered a little bit of it already.
Yeah.
Right? But if a coach finds themselves in a situation in which they see that a lot of their behavior from their team is being problematic, what resources and what ideas would you recommend for them to try to change the culture of the team, try to make it more healthy, try to encourage a lot more equality and a better behavior from their team?
I'm big on personal experiences, so I believe if you can have your team tap into a shelter, experience, things where the empathetic portion side of people, the human base or human person comes out. Now you have a chance to change and say, okay, wow, look, this, like I said, because we're not, most of the time, a kid's not dealing with it if it's not in their household, right? Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how many violent teenagers we have against women, right? I mean, how many acts of violence do we have that's been committed by teenagers, or if it's by adults? Because, like I say, you start young, right, learning that the baby behavior is acceptable, but how many people are willing to commit that act when you're 13, 12, 11, whatever those ages is, compared to when you get 20, 25, 26? That'd be an interesting, stat to kind of look at, because when you have them at that age, every kid, every Canadian I've experienced, I always talk about it, they go to Detroit. I always got the story, man, don't stop at the red light, don't do this, those experiences, right? And that always sticks with them. Every person I ever ask you, and I say, you're from Detroit, oh man, I had the story, somebody told me, don't ever stop at the red light, just drive through, don't drive. That always happens, right? Now, take that same experience and put it to, let's go take a visit to a domestic violence, a shelter. Let's go, experience somebody and look at this environment and see, whoa, that's real. Let me tap into that empathetic side. If it's happening on your team, take a trip to, because every city, or and mostly every city has it, some kind of shelter. Let them experience it firsthand. And now it'll change their perspective. That always will stick with them. Let somebody stand up and talk about what they experienced. Like, we all have that emotional pain. We all have that nerve of empathy. It's embedded in us as in our DNA. Tap into that, because now that changes how you think. That changes your actions. Because now, regardless of who you are, how tough you are, you're going to look and think back, wow, man, if it is going on in your household, man, that's not right. Because, so we're beings of habit, we're computers. What's been instilled, and it's by no fault of your own. Like, you may just be, a kid, and it happened. You're like, I didn't go searching for it. It happened to me, right? Or happened in my environment, in my mind. So now that's part of my database. And it's funny how that worked, because I saw it happening to my mom, and then now it's almost like it's like a leech that jumped onto me. So now I'm more acceptable, more prone to perform those actions because I saw it. And that's a sad part, right? Because just off an action of something that I didn't subscribe to it, I didn't, go and look for it, it came to me. And now I have to deal with it. No different than drugs, right? As we were talking about earlier. If a kid sees someone, doing alcohol, doing drugs, now you have to put a stop to those actions growing, because now, it's less a taboo thing, because I saw somebody do it and it didn't have that big of an impact. That's kind of the way your mind thinks. So that's the same kind of thing. Well, I see it, oh, well, it's still my dad, or it's still my uncle, or still whoever my guardian is. How do I change that? Because he did it. Oh, I still care for him as as my dad or whoever it is. Does that one event change the 9, 10 years, 11 years on this earth of how I look at you? That's the hard part for a kid. Like, when I looked at this person, I didn't know him. He was my stepdad, but I had positive experiences with him, right? And do those negative, for me it did, but not to say for everybody, but those negative, 15 to 20 or whatever it was, I can't put a count on, but does that change the 14 years? Outside of those 20 or 15 events, does those 14 years change who you are as a person? But I mean, for me, it gave me a negative thought process about who you are as a person. But if you have a positive relationship and this individual is talking to you, and that's your dad, you really look up to him, and that's your coach, whatever that is, and they hold a positive light place in your life. Does these 15 events, does it have that impact? It should, in my opinion, and maybe in your opinion, but for some it don't. It's just, oh, he did it. He's still my hero. He's still this. He's still my dad. And they look at it as an alternative. But that dialogue and that mindset needs to change. But I think, tapping into something where the empathetic side comes out, you walk in and you see the pain that somebody deals with, you see that on a day-to-day basis, and you don't get numb to that pain, that can change your whole team.
Okay. So empathy and understanding that a lot of folks come from different experiences, and that they might have role models that might be affecting their behavior and so on, right?
Yeah.
I was at a speaking event the other day. I was hearing similar recommendations about how teams can volunteer at shelters. They can fundraise and so on. Have you done any similar events with your teams?
Well, I've done a lot of events with my kids where I have people come out and speak, right? So instead of me taking them there to like a shelter or something, because like I said, in my environment, my kids, I can't, I'm unaware of what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Those issues I don't deal with. I deal with more of a motivation of athleticism, effort, all those type of things. I don't deal with negative behavior. So for me, it's self-imposing, just, hey man, this is how you treat people, because that's the lesson I want to teach. But if it was something that I have to address on a day-to-day basis, which is something like maybe, like I said, I look at this being the first thing, because now it's the stages. If I talk to you about how you treat people, then I can, gradually get to that point. I don't want to go from how to treat people all the way to, hey man, you don't ever do that. Because why would we talk about, for them, they maybe think, why are we talking about, gender-based violence, and I'm just not running to the football. But I think being able to introduce those acts, hey man, this is how you treat people, this is how you talk to people. When they see what I stand for, them talking to me about my experiences, and I talk to them about my upbringing, that is something that where we're walking down that path, and then I bring people out to speak to them on and say, these are the topics we're going to talk about. This is why I had this person come out to us.
Okay. And lastly, let's talk about university campuses, institutions. What can they do? I feel like there is a sense from some sports teams that they're untouchable by the administration of their schools, right? I was telling one of my coworkers earlier on today how at some point, I went to York University. At some point, some folks from the soccer team, I think, decided to egg our house in some form of revenge because they were dating one of my roommates, and something happened. So they just decided to egg the house, throw ice cream, and just ruin the entire facade. Yeah. So, what recommendations do you give to universities to implement the cause of prevention of gender-based violence?
Oh, that's interesting. You know what? When you have a stronger platform, I think when you're talking sports teams, you develop programs to support, because you're encountering so many different types of kids. Like I said, nobody tells you about their upbringing and what their experiences. But when you have 100, 1,000 kids that come from different economic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, all these things, you have to assume that someone out of those 1,000 kids have experienced some type of, domestic violence, gender-based violence. So you automatically come and you develop a program. I say that because at the University of Michigan where I went to school, when I was going through my ordeal, they didn't have any kind of support system. Their support system was when my situation hit the fan and it came out on the news, was to suspend me from the team. No support, no conversation, no dialogue. You go sit and deal with their issues. We're gonna continue on, like you said in the beginning, that we don't want to taint our university image. We don't want to have these issues around with us now. Years removed, I'm doing a conference here in Toronto, and individual at the University of Michigan, I think it was name was Laura, I can't think of her last name, but they have a program now that they have created to deal with domestic violence issues. Helping kids or young kids coming in from different, environments to be able to deal with their upbringing, their issues that they had at home. And I told her when we finished, because we were both on the same panel, I said, I wish they would have had this when I was around. Just for me to be able to start the healing process for me earlier so I can talk. I said, because ultimately, if I didn't, that could have been one of the turning points for me, but luckily I had other vehicles, other individuals, other situations that happened to me that helped me change. But what if I would have been that guy that continued down the same path? That could have been the turning point. So I almost got the tears because I started reflecting back, like, wow, how ironic is that is, and how powerful that is for a university, because you do have the power. You can take that initiative to be and make a change, because it is something that has occurred, because we have had bullying. We have had, situations where guys have been accused, from NFL all the way down to, amateur sports. But you have a platform and you know that it occurs. You know the dialogue that happens in these locker rooms. You know how society has taught us how to treat women, how to talk to women, right? Like, nobody is getting taught this, maybe some in your household, but it's all learned behavior. So if you understand it from a learned behavior perspective, yes, what you can do is start, it's an existing program and it's staged there, because no different than we have programs for obesity. Weight Watchers is just there. It's always going to be there, right? Those are the programs that you don't have to go search for. You don't have to search for community service. It's there. It's an existing program. Gender-based violence needs to be a program at all major universities so we can ultimately change the behaviors that's been taught leading up to get you to this point. It's a part of society. If we're going to make a change and you have the power to do it, create this platform, because it exists. Even, and that's the part where it's kind of sad in a sense, because we know it exists. Like I said, not if it tell you it's on your doorstep when you stand up for it. But if you don't take that position, but you'll have an alcoholism class, you'll have a drug class, you'll have all these rules that's put in place for societal things. It does. There's tons of drug addicts and alcoholics that play sports. But you take that stand for that, but you don't take the stand for domestic violence. You know what I mean? And you know it exists. So you have to create that program. You do have a program for domestic violence and alcoholism. You have them. This program needs to be there as well, because it's no different. It's the same, and maybe even it has a worse impact on society, but it ultimately has a worse impact on the individual person that's dealing with it, and the women that's being impacted. Those scars will never change, right? Alcoholism, you'll still have your scars, but it's self-inflicted scars. But now we're talking one event that changes the life of two individuals. That's when you start thinking, wow, or multiple individuals, because it's the person who committed the act, the person who's receiving the act. Then what about the people that's extended beyond them? Right? The one phrase of Martin Luther King: anything that happens to you directly happens to us all indirectly. Right? I was experiencing mine, you experienced yours, and indirectly it happened to everyone in society. Like, what happened to my mom happened now is impacting me, it's impacting other people, because I'm using it as a story. Like, it happens to us all, right? So that's one of those things where it's not just like, a drug where I'm just self-inflicted. I'm impacting the rest of people in society because of just one act. And it's changing two lives, and ultimately if you use it in the right way, it can have a positive effect to change other people's lives, or it can be a recreation of the same thing and then continue on for the rest of our lives.
Definitely. So we really need ongoing programs
Yes.
that support students and athletes
Yes.
in order to break cycles of violence that go like from generation to generation, and also understand sexism as a learned behavior and tackles that in a way that is not non-shaming but instead more education.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Very much so.
Thanks a lot. And because we're running out of time, we only have 10 minutes left. I have one last question about the Me Too movement and Time's Up. So, how do you think these movements that came up just like in 2017, 2018, how are they changing the sports in general in North America? And what are they saying about current athletes and the sports industry? Because there is this example that I brought of course, Dr. Larry Nassar, right? He was abusing. He was. I don't have his position right here, but he was in charge of doing the medical examinations for most of the athletes, part of the USA gymnastics team. He had been accused already by multiple people, but it took a long while for investigations to happen. I found on the news that the former senior vice president of the USA Gymnastics had been told to be quiet about his actions. Like it seems like they already knew what had been happening for a while, but they were just trying to cover that. So, what do you think Me Too and Time's Up is bringing up to the conversation, and how do you think it's changing sports?
Well, any publicity that you bring to a cause ultimately has a positive and a negative effect, right? So, one, when we talk about gender-based violence, we're talking about something that, and for the most part, occurs behind closed doors. So it's basically opening up the door to be able to talk about it on a common, in a normal conversation on a day-to-day basis. It's blowing the door open. Just, hey, this is what's happening. One. So that's the first thing that it's doing. Secondly, it's shaming the individuals who are committing those acts, right? Anytime we walk, anybody, I don't care, your name and who you are is what you represent, and that means the world to you. If you are in society and you're walking down a path about trying to build a product of yourself, meaning, if it could be anybody. I mean, your friends, what they talk about you, that means the world to you. How people say and portray you, that's just society. That's how we're taught in our society now. So for those individuals committing those shames that they're experiencing, yes, are making a difference for those individuals. So now it's giving people the courage to stand up and speak out. Ooh, somebody else is good. I'm just not by myself. I always look back at myself as when I was in high school and I was going through my ordeal with my family. When I began to speak on it, I realized that my neighbor was dealing with it. My best friend across the street, his mom was being abused. A friend down the street, his mom was being abused. And I go, wow, I wish I would have, I mean, you on one side, you wish you would have known it, but I wish I would have known in a sense so I could speak out about it and get the support that I needed, not knowing, feeling alone. So it's two sides. So on one side, it's the embarrassment, right? So these people that are experiencing the shame, and then two, the fear of, wow, I'm going to be, exposed. Those three things in itself is deterring factors. Not saying it's going to prevent you from doing it, but are deterring factors of saying, wow, I do not want to be shamed. I don't want to be, looked at as a liar, or I don't want to be labeled as this, because that label it never leaves you. Chris Brown, regardless how great an artist he is, will always have that label. Ike Turner will always have that label. They will never get rid of it. Bill Cosby now would always have that label. It's always a part of you. You cannot get rid of that label. It's no different than me being a black man. I can never get rid of that, being called that. On the flip side, for the woman, it provides support, it provides encouragement, and provides also a sense of shame that I have to be able to speak out about it. That may be the one thing that prohibits people from coming out because they don't want to be looked at. I stand before you. Please speak out and do about it because it's not no shame to deal with that. You have the support of other individuals, of people out here, and they want to support you and give you all the tools that you need. You shouldn't be ashamed of something that you had no cause. You didn't ask for it. You're not warranted. You don't deserve it. You know, I always say we're beings of love. You deserve to be respected and loved. That's your gift as a human being. When you're a baby, every child wants to be just held and kissed and given affection to. So when we get to society, we get taught these elements of hitting, negativity, and all. That's human nature that's been given and taught in society. Now, trying to change life, that's a hard thing to change. But you can change the elements that create the life, and not changing the life, right? So when you look at two sides of it, there's motivation for those who come out, and then there's the shame of those who are committing the crime. When you combine those two and you put shine the light on it, ultimately it still exists out in society, but it's starting to get momentum because now people it's talking about it. And I think when you bring the publicity to it, it opens up the door, the dialogue that we're having to say, okay, how is it that we got to make a change for the people? Because right now, while we're talking, somebody's going through it right now. Mm-hmm. But if they can hear a message from a positive person or say, look, I've been through it to change your life, they'll be more willing to step out and say, okay, I'm going to stand. Because if I can, it's ultimately like, you commit and hold hands and you create that circle. Mm-hmm. It's ultimately like that. I grab your hand, you got my back, I have you guys back, and then I go extend my hand out to somebody else. And I'm waiting for somebody to grab my hand so they can go join my team. And then somebody else does the same thing. And if we can continue that link, and now we can you can control that portion of it, and now you can see that grow. Now we have a chance to be able to change the whole epidemic. But if we don't sit here and open up the door, which I think those things do, is they open up the door for the conversation. That somebody's willing to say, okay, I'm not dealing, I don't care about the shame. The motivation is for me to be able to feel positive, for me to be able to feel loved. And then for these guys over here who have committed the act, for them to not want to have to deal with the shame. I don't have to have that label because that label is not going to you're not going to get rid of it. It's a part of our law, a sex offender.
Now you have mentioned two parties here, the survivors and the people we're shaming because they committed horrendous acts, right? But now, what's the role of men? Mm-hmm. You and I, what can we do in order to support Me Too and Time's Up? Wow. What is our role in that movement?
One, first you got to be the example, right? And it goes back to the same thing even as a coach and as a man, I have to be the example that I want to be. I want us to see change in society. I have to be that. For me, my daughters, my wife, first and foremost, my daughters, I'm the man that they're going to marry. I look at that in my head. Whatever example I set is what they're going to accept in their life. So I put on a conscious, considerate effort. Not like, I got to think about it every day, but when I'm dealing with my wife and we're communicating, I make it a point that when they see how we communicate, if it's positive, in a positive sense, or if it's adverse, you have a dispute, it's in a positive manner. It's coming from a respectful place so that they know, all right, when someone's dealing with me, this is how you're going to treat me. Mm-hmm. I always say you got to teach people how to treat you. Because if you don't teach them how to treat you, they're going to treat you the way that they've been taught how to treat people. So you have to teach them, what is my elements that I'm going to accept and not going to accept? That's the first thing. Secondly, us as men, we need to challenge ourselves to say, okay, look, am I willing to step out and challenge somebody else in my circle? It was a question you asked me earlier about one of my teammates. Okay. If one of my teammates commit that act, and do I continue to support him? Or do I challenge him? Right? And I walked off with that question. I go, wow, it's a hard thing. Because we're in the locker room, you're on my team, and I support you as my teammate. But then when you walk out of here, like, I may not hang out with you. Just because you're on my team don't mean that we're friends. Like, we're just in the locker room, we share a job together. no different than any other job. We just share this job together. We share this office together. You walk and go your path, I go my path. Do I, one, as a man, stand up to you and ask you, man, like, hey, you need to go change your behaviors. So first, if I'm going to take that path, I better have my stuff in order for me to come and challenge you on what you're doing. That's the first thing. Secondly, is this going to change the environment of this work environment that I have? And third, somebody asks you, so is this my battle? Do I have to fight this battle? Because is it really my battle? So you asking those are the three questions you're asking yourself, right? But when you go and you say, all right, look, understanding that it occurs and it's out in society, I don't have to ask those three questions, because now I'm saying, look, I'm going to stand up, and I don't have to go and call you out. I don't have to yell at you, scream at you. I don't have to all I got to do, either give you a card or support you, because I understand where it's coming from. You were taught this element from someone else. So if all I got to do is show you the support to say, okay, hey, brother, I'm here to help you out. Here's my hand. You need some help. Let me help you out. Because I guarantee you, those guys who are sitting, mostly, especially athletes, when your name, the name that's on your back matters to you, you don't want that name to be tainted. So when you're walking around here and you may have this persona of like being a tough guy, but you're knowing that your dollars are predicated based off of what your reputation is. So if I'm willing to help you, I have to stand up as a man and say, okay, look, bro, I can help you out, and extend my hand. So that's, as a man, I believe, is our role to be able to stop sitting back, not taking on the cause because, oh, it's not my issue, I'm caring about their, but no, I'm concerned about the pain because I dealt with it. I understand on both sides what my mom dealt, what I dealt with. And I understand the impact that it can change your life as well as my life. So I take that stand to say, okay, look, I'm going to extend my hand, not out of shame to talk about you, but as a support system for you. Mm-hmm. And I stand up to help you and change your behaviors. So as a man, you need to stand up and change. So just stand and provide your voice. If you see it, just simply, I told kids this. I was at an event in Loyola, and I said, it happened to me when I was a little kid. I was walking down the street going to the store, and I heard a man yelling at someone. Didn't know what it was. It was from in the backyard. Mm-hmm. I kept walking, and all I did was clap my hands. And the guy turned around. And he stopped doing what he's doing, right? Because I'm watching. Yeah. And he changed. So I told the kids, anytime you see something, clap your hands. Because now it one snaps the person out of what they're doing, and then it ultimately lets them know, like, I'm watching you. Like, you're not gonna sit here and do it and right in front of me, right? You're gonna change your behaviors, and then you go, oh wow, and it snapped the guy. So I always give the guys a clap. Take the clap. Collectively loving all people. If you take that and if that's what it represents for me, that'll change someone's life. So I'll give that to people. Like, clap your hands if you see it. It'll change somebody's life.
Great. That's an awesome message. Well, thanks a lot. I think we're running out of time. It's 1:05.
Oh, wow.
And maybe I want to check if there are any questions coming from Facebook or from our live audience. So, one question. How can we help coaches be more empathetic?
You know what? Coaches have the tool to be empathetic, right? Naturally, because they look at your athletes and you look at it from a perspective of trying to make them better and feeling. That's what a true coach does. Where is he at? How can I help him get to this point? I think it's taking and directing those energies towards the cause, because they have the element of empathy. That's a natural trait as a coach. Mm-hmm. Just understanding where you're sitting at. All right, cool. This kid, he can grasp his skill. He can't grasp it. So how do I get this person to get to this point? Mm-hmm. That's the empathetic component of it. Understanding, put myself in your shoes. They have it. It's just a matter of directing their energies towards the cause, and now that can ultimately change. It could change the spectrum of society. We got coaches everywhere. And these kids look up to these coaches. A coach can change by just saying anything. Like I said, I still talk to you about the coach, what he said to me. I still remember those elements, right? And he changed my life in a positive way because I made it a positive thing. But it could have been a negative situation if I'd allowed it to be there. So it's just a matter of them directing their energies towards the cause.
Mm-hmm. Do you think universities and institutions can do something to foster that empathy on coaches?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, they could just make it a mandatory program. Yeah. Like this is a part of what our society, what our university stands for. Mm-hmm. We stand up for domestic violence, or we stand up against domestic violence. Mm-hmm. We stand up against gender-based violence. We stand up for any negativity that's against women, men, anybody. Mm-hmm. If you take that stand, and you no different than they have any other type of support system, NCAA, you're a powerful conglomerate. Kids look up from the young ages to go inspire to go play Division I sports or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. If that's a part of your mantra, yes, they will definitely support that and stand for that as well because they look up to you.
Great, awesome. And the second question we have, how can we address
coaches
on coaches' problematic behaviors?
Ooh, I think that's being taught too, right? I mean, it's what, when I look at coaching, and especially in the amateur realm, there's no. I mean, they do have certifications that they have, but if I want to volunteer my time to coach, I can go volunteer my time. Right, so any Joe Blow walking down the street and he's like, hey, I want to coach, I want to help. My son is playing, I want to help my kid. Mm-hmm. So the problem with that is that there's nothing governing that. So it's when you talk coach can be anybody. It could be any label, you can label any individual a coach, right? It's now the individual who has this label attached to him to let him understand how powerful the word coach means. That's a powerful term. That is the one element, is to be able to address every coach and say, man, do you know the power that you have? Because no different than that coach did that had the impact on me, he can change a life. The words that is instilled or comes out of his mouth has so much impact. These kids look up to these guys, mm-hmm. right? Because coach said it, and it's funny. Like I coach, like I said, I'm coaching my girls' basketball team, mm-hmm. and the reason I'm coaching because my daughter wanted to play in the summer. They didn't have a summer program for them, so they asked, "Hey, would you coach?" Cool. These same kids that I saw would sit on the stands and the bleachers watching, and they would go, "Hey, how you doing, Mr. Winters?" Now I'm coach. You see, I mean, and it's just how quickly that switched. Because I decided to take a role, and now they look at me I assume in their mind that role, whatever coach means to them. Mm-hmm. But I understand the power of a coach. So I take it very seriously when you say, hey coach, I go, man, you were just calling me Mr. Winters just 2 weeks ago, and now I'm coach. But I take that serious. So now it's to be able to talk to all the coaches to say, look, do you understand the power you have? And if you do, you respect the power, and then that changes your behavior because you respect the power of the impact that you can have on somebody's life.
Okay. Awesome. So, Chuck, once again, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.
Your message has been super powerful, and we hope to work with you in the past and see you again.
Oh,
You're welcome here at the office anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Take care.